You think the danger in a relationship is distance, coldness, lack of love. It isn't. The real danger is something far quieter. It begins the moment you believe everything is finally safe. Most men don't lose their relationships because they stop caring. They lose them because they start needing. At some point, without warning, the woman you trust will begin doing things that feel irrational. She provokes. She pulls away. She challenges what used to feel solid. And you stand there confused, trying to fix something that was never broken on the surface. What's happening isn't emotional. It's biological. There is a test that begins only after comfort sets in, a test most men don't even realize they're taking. And once you fail it, no amount of love effort or sacrifice can undo the damage. This isn't about being cruel. It isn't about games or manipulation. It's about strength frame and the quiet shift that turns attraction into contempt. If you don't understand this dynamic, you won't see it coming. And by the time you feel the consequences, it's already too late. Before we go deeper, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if this topic speaks to you, consider subscribing. Not out of urgency, just alignment. At first, everything feels settled. The chaos of the early months is gone. The uncertainty, the tension, the constant edge of not knowing where things are going. Now there is routine, familiar mornings, predictable nights, shared habits that feel earned. You tell yourself this is what stability looks like. This is what commitment is supposed to feel like. I believe that too. I thought the hard part was over. I thought once you pass the phase of proving yourself, once the bond is established, the relationship moves into a safer, quieter place. I mistook familiarity for security. I mistook comfort for permanence. That illusion lasts right up until it doesn't. It doesn't arrive with a warning. There's no announcement, no dramatic event you can point to and say, this is where it changed. It happens subtly, almost invisibly. A shift in tone, a look held a second too long, a comment that feels unnecessary but lands heavier than it should. At first you brush it off. She questions a decision you made. Nothing major, just a casual remark. You explain yourself calmly. You assume clarity will resolve it. That's how reasonable adults operate, you tell yourself. You don't see it as a problem. You see it as communication. Then it happens again. A disagreement that shouldn't matter suddenly escalates. Something trivial becomes charged. You notice she's less affectionate, less warm. Not distant enough to confront, but distant enough to feel. You ask yourself what you did wrong. You replay recent conversations in your head, searching for a mistake. You don't find one. That's what makes it unsettling. The woman you thought you understood now reacts in ways that don't match the situation. She seems dissatisfied without being able to explain why. When you ask, the answers are vague. I don't know. It's just a feeling. You've changed. Each response feels incomplete, like it's circling something neither of you can name. You start trying harder, not desperately, not yet. Just small adjustments. You become more attentive, more accommodating. You listen more carefully. You soften your tone. You tell yourself relationships require effort, and this is what effort looks like. You believe you're doing the mature thing. What you don't realize is that this is the moment the battlefield is formed. From your perspective, you're fixing problems. From hers, something else is happening entirely. Something older, deeper, something that has nothing to do with logic or fairness. Her behavior feels sudden because the trigger isn't external. It isn't caused by a specific argument or event. It's caused by time. by familiarity, by the slow erosion of mystery that happens when you stop living as an independent man and start organizing your life around the relationship. In the beginning, you were opaque, unpredictable. You had momentum before she entered your life, and she joined something already in motion. You didn't need permission. You didn't check in for approval. You had your own priorities, your own direction. Over time, that changes. Not because you intend it to, because comfort invites compromise. You start adjusting your schedule. You cancel things you once protected. You choose peace over friction. None of these decisions feel weak in isolation. They feel reasonable, loving even. But taken together, they reshape how you move through the world. You become available, then predictable, then attached. An attachment feels like devotion to you. But to her subconscious, it reads differently. It reads as dependence, as risk, as a question that needs answering. This is why the shift never happens on day one. In the early phase, she doesn't test you in this way, because there's nothing to test yet. Your strength is assumed. Your independence is visible. Your life exists outside of her, and she is choosing to be part of it. Later, when your life starts bending around her presence, the equation changes. Her subconscious notices before her conscious mind does. That's why she can't explain what's wrong. She just feels it. Something is off. The man she chose feels different, less solid, less grounded, less resistant. That feeling creates discomfort, and discomfort demands resolution. So the testing begins, not intentionally, not maliciously. She doesn't wake up planning to provoke you. The behavior emerges automatically. A challenge here, a boundary push there, emotional volatility where there used to be ease. She's searching for information, not trying to hurt you. But if you don't understand what's happening, it feels personal, random, unfair. You think the relationship is under attack. In reality, your frame is. Every reaction you give now carries weight, not in words, but in signal. How quickly you explain yourself, how eager you are to smooth things over, how uncomfortable you become when she's displeased. None of this goes unnoticed, even if it's never consciously tracked. You start to feel like you're walking through a familiar room that's been subtly rearranged. Nothing is obviously wrong, but nothing feels stable either. The ground that used to support you now shifts under pressure. This is where most men make a critical mistake. They assume the relationship needs more investment, more reassurance, more emotional labor. They double down on behaviors that feel virtuous, but quietly erode their position. They don't realize that the test they're facing cannot be passed by effort. It can only be passed by presence, by being unchanged at the core. But by the time you notice the shift, you've already changed. Not drastically, just enough. Enough for her subconscious to ask the question that alters everything. Is this man still who I thought he was? That question doesn't seek reassurance. It seeks proof. And the moment it's asked, the peaceful phase you thought you were in is over. Not because the relationship is doomed, but because it's entered a different stage. One with higher stakes. One that doesn't forgive misunderstanding. From this point forward, nothing is neutral. Silence, explanation, compromise, resistance. All of it is data. And if you misread the situation, if you respond from fear instead of solidity, the conclusion her subconscious reaches will not be in your favor. You think you're maintaining harmony. She's deciding whether you're strong enough to stay. Most men believe this shift is personal. They think it's about something they said, something they forgot, something they failed to do. They assume the woman in front of them is reacting to a mistake, And if they can just identify it, everything will go back to how it was. That belief keeps them trapped, because what's unfolding has very little to do with surface behavior. It isn't about dishes, tone, priorities, or time spent together. Those are just the excuses the mind reaches for when the real cause is too uncomfortable to face. The truth is simpler and far more unforgiving. Every woman, without exception, runs this test. Not because she is cruel, not because she wants chaos, and not because she is consciously dissatisfied. The test is automatic, subconscious, triggered by a single internal question that arises once comfort replaces uncertainty. Who is this man really? In the early phase, that question doesn't exist. Attraction is fresh. Curiosity is alive. You haven't revealed your full pattern yet. She doesn't know exactly how you'll respond under pressure because pressure hasn't arrived. Your strength is assumed because it hasn't been challenged. But assumptions decay over time. As familiarity grows, mystery fades. As predictability increases, certainty demands verification. Her subconscious no longer accepts the initial signal at face value. It wants updated data, current data, proof that the man standing in front of her now is the same man she chose then. That's when the testing begins. This isn't the playful testing from the dating phase. This isn't teasing or light resistance. This is something older, more primal. A stress test designed to expose weakness, not create intimacy. And the most dangerous part is this: she doesn't know she's doing it. Her conscious mind believes she's reacting reasonably. She feels irritated, dissatisfied, unsettled. She can justify her behavior with words, but the words are placeholders. They point to symptoms, not causes. Her subconscious, meanwhile, is running a different process entirely. It is evaluating strength. In that evaluation, there are only two outcomes: strong or weak, dominant or submissive, leader or follower. There is no spectrum, no temporary category, no allowance for context. Her subconscious doesn't care about intentions. It doesn't care how good your heart is. It cares about one thing: can this man hold his ground? Every interaction becomes evidence. When she challenges a decision, how do you respond? Do you calmly stand by it, or do you rush to justify yourself? When she's upset, do you remain steady, or do you become anxious? When conflict arises, do you address it without fear, or do you try to avoid it at any cost? None of these moments feel significant on their own. That's why men miss them. They treat each instance as isolated, disconnected. But her subconscious aggregates them. Patterns form quickly. Conclusions follow. This is where the internal split happens. The man who remains centered doesn't experience these moments as tests. He doesn't register them as threats. He responds the same way he always has, because his behavior is an extension of who he is, not a strategy. His boundaries are natural. His reactions are consistent. He doesn't feel the need to prove anything. The man who has shifted even slightly feels it immediately. He feels the tension in his chest when she's displeased. He feels the urge to explain, to soften, to appease. He feels responsible for her emotional state. And because he feels responsible, he begins negotiating with himself. Just this once, I'll let it go. It's not worth the argument. I'll make it up to her later. Each compromise seems harmless, reasonable, even loving. But to her subconscious, each one is a data point moving you in the wrong direction. Weakness isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic failure. It reveals itself through flexibility where there should be firmness, through accommodation where there should be certainty, through emotional reactivity where there should be calm. And once weakness is suspected, the testing escalates. This is why her behavior feels confusing, inconsistent. She pushes in one moment, withdraws in the next. She creates friction, then watches. She provokes discomfort, then observes how you manage it. She's not trying to punish you. She's trying to answer a question her biology insists on asking. Are you still the man I thought you were? The more you chase clarity, the further it slips away. Because clarity isn't the goal. Reaction is. Your emotional state becomes the metric. Your stability becomes the evidence. Men often ask why this doesn't happen from the beginning. It's because in the beginning, your strength is theoretical. Later, it must be practical. Early attraction is built on potential. Long-term attraction is built on proof. And proof can only be gathered under pressure. Comfort creates the conditions. Time triggers the test. The mistake men make is assuming love changes the rules. It doesn't. Attachment doesn't soften this process. It intensifies it. The more invested she becomes, the more important the answer is. Choosing the wrong man isn't just disappointing. It's dangerous at a subconscious level. So the system designed to prevent that outcome becomes more active, not less. This is where many men misinterpret kindness for safety. They believe that being accommodating reduces tension, that empathy earns security, that sacrifice deepens connection. And in healthy relationships between whole individuals, those things can be true. But during a subconscious strength test, those same behaviors are interpreted differently. Accommodation looks like submission. Empathy looks like emotional volatility. Sacrifice looks like self-erasure. Her subconscious doesn't translate these actions through moral language. It translates them through survival logic. And survival logic is brutal in its simplicity. Can he lead himself? If the answer is unclear, the pressure increases. She may become more critical, more emotionally unpredictable. She may withdraw affection to see if you panic. She may challenge your authority in small ways just to observe whether it exists. Each behavior feels disconnected, random. But they are all probing the same thing, your frame. Men who fail at this stage often believe they're being tested unfairly. They ask why she can't just communicate directly, why she creates problems instead of discussing them, why she doesn't appreciate effort. Those questions miss the point. This process does not respond to words. It responds to being. You cannot explain your way through it. You cannot reason your way out. You cannot negotiate with a mechanism that doesn't speak language. You can only pass or fail based on how solid you remain under pressure. And here is the hardest truth to accept. Once this question has been asked, it will not go away on its own. Ignoring it doesn't help. Overcompensating makes it worse. The only thing that resolves it is consistent evidence over time. Evidence that you are unmoved at your core, that you are not shaped by her moods, that you are not dependent on her approval to remain stable. Until that evidence is provided, the testing continues. Quietly, relentlessly. You may think you're fighting for the relationship, but what's really happening is far more fundamental. You are being evaluated as a man, not by her conscious standards, but by a system older than both of you. And if you don't recognize that shift for what it is, every well-intentioned move you make will push you further into the category you're trying to avoid. Because from this point on, it's no longer about love. It's about strength. Her subconscious does not see nuance. This is what most men never understand. They believe they are being evaluated on a curve. That context matters. That effort earns credit. That strength can coexist with moments of weakness as long as the overall intention is good. That belief is comforting. It is also wrong. In her subconscious, there are only two categories: strong men, weak men. There is no middle position, no temporary status, no mostly strong with a few flaws. The classification is binary, and once it begins forming, it hardens quickly. This isn't a moral judgment. It isn't a conscious opinion. It's a survival algorithm. Ancient, efficient, unforgiving. The strong man is not defined by volume aggression or control. He doesn't dominate conversations or demand obedience. He doesn't posture. He doesn't perform masculinity. He simply exists from a place of internal authority. He knows who he is. He has boundaries that don't need to be announced because they are enforced naturally. He doesn't seek permission to live his life. He doesn't outsource his sense of self to her emotions. He is calm in conflict, not because he suppresses emotion, but because his identity isn't threatened by it. When she is upset, he doesn't rush to fix it, not because he doesn't care, but because he understands that her emotional state is not his responsibility. He listens. He responds when appropriate. But he does not abandon himself to restore peace. He is willing to lose her, not as a threat, not as leverage, but as a reality he has already made peace with. His life is full with or without her presence. That doesn't make him cold. It makes him unshakable. Because of that, when she tests him, he doesn't feel tested. His responses are consistent because they are not calculated. He doesn't pass tests intentionally. He passes them by being himself. The weak man is the opposite. He is defined by reaction, by adjustment, by emotional vigilance. He monitors her moods the way a pilot monitors turbulence, always ready to correct course to avoid discomfort. He needs her approval to feel stable. He checks himself before speaking. He edits his behavior to prevent conflict. He compromises values not because he believes in flexibility, but because he fears consequences. He believes love means sacrifice. He believes understanding means yielding. He believes keeping her happy is his responsibility. And every time he chooses her emotions over his integrity, he confirms the conclusion her subconscious is already drifting toward. Weak. The tragedy is that he thinks he's being mature. He tells himself he's choosing harmony. He believes he's being the bigger person. He frames his fear as empathy, his avoidance, as kindness, his submission, as devotion. But her subconscious doesn't interpret it that way. It sees a man who cannot hold his ground. This is why strength is measured in moments that seem insignificant. It's measured when she complains about something minor and you immediately shift to appease her, when she questions your plans and you abandon them without resistance, when she expresses displeasure and you feel compelled to justify your existence. Each moment whispers the same message: I will bend for you. And bending repeated enough times becomes collapse. Her subconscious is not tracking what you say. It is tracking what you tolerate. It is watching how easily your frame can be disrupted, how quickly you abandon yourself when pressure is applied. This is why men who are successful, intelligent, and confident in every other area of life can still fail catastrophically in relationships. Strength is contextual. A man may lead teams, make decisions, command respect at work, and still become submissive at home if his identity collapses in the presence of her emotions. Her subconscious does not care about his resume. It cares about how he behaves when she pushes. And she will push. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because the stakes are different for her. At a biological level, choosing a weak man has consequences. Even in a modern world where survival isn't immediately threatened, the wiring remains. Her subconscious cannot afford to assume strength. It must verify it. So it creates situations that reveal truth. She challenges your authority. She disrupts comfort. She destabilizes the environment. And then she watches. Do you remain centered, or do you scramble? Do you hold your position, or do you fold? Do you stay calm, or do you become reactive? Each answer is recorded. Men often believe they can compensate later, that one strong stand will erase 100 compromises, that a sudden display of firmness will restore balance. It doesn't work that way. Classification is cumulative. Once her subconscious begins leaning toward weak, every subsequent interaction is filtered through that assumption. Your actions are interpreted differently. Your boundaries are tested harder. Your firmness is questioned. What once felt natural now feels performative to her. That's why early strength matters so much. In the beginning, when attraction is fresh, her subconscious is generous. It gives the benefit of the doubt. But once doubt enters, generosity disappears. Proof is required, and the standard is unforgiving. This is where many men panic. They feel the loss of respect but don't understand its cause. They sense the shift in her behavior and try to correct it with effort. More communication, more vulnerability, more compromise. Each attempt pushes them deeper into the category they're trying to escape. Because strength cannot be demonstrated through appeasement. A strong man does not negotiate his core. He does not trade his identity for peace. He does not contort himself to be acceptable. This doesn't mean he is rigid or cruel. It means he is anchored. He can listen without collapsing. He can love without clinging. He can engage without chasing. The weak man cannot. He feels every fluctuation in her mood as a threat to his stability. He reacts emotionally. He explains excessively. He apologizes preemptively. He gives ground he never should have surrendered. And her subconscious draws its conclusion. Not consciously, not maliciously, decisively. Once that conclusion begins to solidify, the dynamic changes permanently. She may still love him in some way. She may still appreciate his efforts. But attraction shifts into something else. Respect erodes. Desire becomes conflicted. Contempt starts forming quietly beneath the surface. This is why men feel blindsided when relationships collapse. They believe they did everything right. They cared. They listened. They sacrificed. They showed up. They did. They just did it from the wrong position. Strength is not about dominance over her. It is about sovereignty over yourself. And her subconscious knows the difference immediately. I watched this process unfold in real time with a man I worked with. At the beginning, he was solid, grounded. He had structure in his life before marriage and didn't abandon it once he committed. He trained 5 days a week. He kept close friendships. He had interests that existed independently of his wife. When she expressed dissatisfaction, he listened, but he didn't dissolve. "I need this for my health," he would say calmly when she complained about the gym. "This matters to me." And that was the end of the discussion. Not because he shut her down, because there was nothing to negotiate. His life was already built around principles, not reactions. She might not have liked every choice, but she respected the consistency behind them. For a while. Then the pressure increased. At first, it came wrapped in concern. She questioned his priorities. She framed her dissatisfaction as emotional distance. "You care more about the gym than me. Your friends matter more than our marriage." The words sounded reasonable, even loving. They weren't accusations. They were invitations to compromise. And he accepted them. Not all at once. Slowly. Incrementally. He cut his gym schedule from 5 days to 3. Told himself balance was healthy. When the complaints continued, he reduced it again. He stopped seeing friends on weeknights, then on weekends, unless she had plans. Each decision felt small. None felt like surrender. But surrender is rarely dramatic. Within a year, the man I knew was softer, less focused. He moved differently. He spoke with more hesitation. His posture changed. His body followed his psychology. He gained weight. Not because he stopped caring about his health, but because caring about himself had begun to feel selfish. By the second year, he had lost touch with most of his friends. The gym was something he did only when she was busy or away. His world had narrowed. Her presence now defined his available space. And her reaction to this change was not gratitude. It was disgust, not openly, not consciously, but it leaked out, in tone, in looks, in the way she spoke to him when she thought he wouldn't notice. Her patience thinned. Her respect evaporated. She criticized him more harshly for smaller things. Men often think women want sacrifice. They don't. They want strength. And strength cannot survive in a man who has erased himself. He tried to fix it the way most men do. He became more attentive, more helpful. He took on more responsibility at home. He tried to show her how committed he was. He believed effort would restore what was lost. It did the opposite, because every act of over-accommodation confirmed the same conclusion. He was no longer a man with a life she could join. He was a man orbiting her existence, waiting for direction. At no point did she sit down and think, "My husband is weak." Her subconscious didn't need words. She felt it. And once that feeling took hold, it poisoned everything. Attraction doesn't survive pity. Desire doesn't coexist with contempt. Love without respect becomes obligation, not connection. By the time he realized something was deeply wrong, the dynamic was already set. He couldn't understand why she was colder now than when he was busier. Why she seemed more irritated when he was more present. Why doing everything she asked for made her less affectionate, not more. From his perspective, he was becoming a better partner. From hers, she was living with a man who had abandoned himself. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic fight. It came quietly. She stopped touching him, stopped initiating conversation. She spent more time away from home, emotionally at first, then physically. When he confronted her, desperate for clarity, her answers were vague. "I don't feel the same. Something is missing. You're not the man you used to be." He heard those words as confusion. They were diagnosis. The man she married was gone. What replaced him was someone she couldn't respect, no matter how kind he was. This is the part most men refuse to accept. You can do everything right in a relationship and still destroy attraction if you do it from a place of weakness. Effort is not neutral. When it's driven by fear of loss, it communicates that fear. And fear is the fastest way to erode desire. Her subconscious doesn't reward sacrifice, it punishes it. Not because she's cruel, but because sacrifice signals dependency. And dependency is incompatible with strength. When she looks at a man who has shrunk his life to fit her comfort, she doesn't feel safe. She feels trapped. She feels responsible. She feels burdened by his need. And nothing kills attraction faster than responsibility for a man's emotional stability. By the third year, the marriage was functionally dead. They shared a home, but not a bond. He tried to revive it with conversation, therapy, promises to improve. Each attempt made him smaller in her eyes, because he was still negotiating from the same position. He wanted her approval, and she could feel it. Eventually, she left, not in anger, in relief. He was left confused, broken, unable to reconcile how becoming more accommodating had led to abandonment. He had followed every piece of advice society offers men. Be supportive. Be understanding. Put her first. And it destroyed him. What happened to him wasn't unique. It was inevitable. The moment he began trading his frame for peace, the relationship's foundation cracked. Everything that followed was just gravity doing its work. Once a man abandons himself, the relationship doesn't collapse immediately. It decays quietly, predictably. And by the time the damage is visible, it's already irreversible. Here is the truth that most men recoil from when they first hear it. The more attached you become, the weaker you appear. Not emotionally weaker, not morally weaker, structurally weaker. This goes against everything you've been taught. Every movie, every piece of advice, every well-meaning phrase repeated so often it sounds like wisdom. Make her your priority. Happy wife, happy life. Love means sacrifice. Those ideas feel noble. They feel right. They are also deeply misleading. Think back to the beginning, not emotionally, but factually. When attraction was strongest, when her interest was effortless, when she leaned toward you instead of you leaning toward her. Were you attached then? No. You had a life, a direction, a sense of momentum that existed before she entered the picture. You weren't reorganizing your world around her moods. You weren't waiting for validation. You weren't afraid to lose her because you hadn't built your identity on her presence yet. That is not a coincidence. Attachment didn't create attraction. Independence did. Attraction was born from the fact that you could take her or leave her. Not in a careless way, or in a grounded way. She was choosing to join something already complete. Over time, that dynamic inverted. Slowly, subtly, your sense of stability became tied to her reactions. Her mood began to matter more than your direction. Her approval started to feel necessary instead of optional. Her happiness became more important than your integrity. You didn't call it fear. You called it love. But her subconscious doesn't interpret it that way. Her subconscious reads attachment as dependence. It reads emotional reliance as instability. It reads neediness the same way the body reads fear. Instantly, without discussion, without mercy. And once that signal is detected, the testing intensifies. Not because she wants to hurt you, because uncertainty has entered the system. When a woman senses that a man needs her more than he needs himself, something fundamental shifts. The polarity collapses. She no longer feels chosen. She feels required. And being required creates pressure, not desire. Her subconscious asks a dangerous question. If he needs me this much, what happens if I pull away? So she does. She withdraws affection, creates emotional distance, delays responses, challenges boundaries. Not to be cruel, but to measure your reaction. To see whether your center holds when her presence is reduced. Most men fail right here. They panic. They chase. They explain. They apologize. They increase effort. They try to restore closeness by giving more of what caused the problem in the first place. Attention, validation, emotional labor. Each attempt confirms the same thing. He cannot tolerate loss. And a man who cannot tolerate loss cannot be strong. This is where the process becomes self-reinforcing. The more she pulls away, the more anxious he becomes. The more anxious he becomes, the more he tries to secure her. The more he tries to secure her, the less she respects him. The less she respects him, the more she pulls away. From his perspective, the relationship is deteriorating mysteriously. From her subconscious perspective, the data is becoming clearer. Weak. Men often misunderstand this stage because it feels so personal. They believe she is reacting to their behavior in the moment. But she is reacting to what their behavior represents. need. And need is not attractive. It is threatening. Threatening because it signals that if she leaves, he collapses. That he cannot regulate himself without her. That she is now responsible not just for the relationship, but for his emotional survival. No woman wants that role. Not consciously, not subconsciously. So the system applies pressure. She creates drama over nothing. She questions decisions she never cared about before. She becomes emotionally inconsistent. One day warm, the next cold. She withholds clarity. She destabilizes the environment. And then she watches. Does he remain grounded, or does he unravel? Most men unravel quietly, internally. They obsess. They ruminate. They lose focus at work. They abandon routines. Their world shrinks further as they try to fix the relationship. They think if they just hold on tighter, the ground will stop shaking. It won't. Because the shaking isn't the problem. It's the test. Her subconscious is not asking whether you love her. It's asking whether you can survive without her. And here's the paradox that destroys men who don't understand it. The more you show you can't live without her, the more she feels compelled to see what happens if she leaves. Not because she wants to leave, because the uncertainty demands resolution. When attachment replaces wholeness, attraction turns into obligation. And obligation always breeds resentment, even in good people, even in loving women. This is why men who do everything right still lose relationships. They do the right things from the wrong internal position. They give affection because they need reassurance. They listen because they fear abandonment. They compromise because they cannot tolerate tension. All of that is visible at a level words never reach. Her subconscious reads it instantly. And once that reading occurs, every interaction is interpreted through that lens. Your kindness feels heavy. Your concern feels suffocating. Your presence feels intrusive instead of comforting. You don't become safer by needing her. You become a liability. That is the brutal truth. Not because women are cruel, but because nature does not reward dependence in men. It never has. And no amount of social conditioning has overwritten that code. This is the moment where many men attempt a desperate correction. They swing to the opposite extreme. They try to become cold, distant, emotionless. They withdraw affection in an attempt to regain control. They put on an act of indifference while internally spiraling. It fails. Because her subconscious doesn't respond to performance. It responds to state. You cannot fake wholeness. If you are pretending not to care while secretly desperate for approval, the signal is still desperation, and it is detected immediately. The tests continue, often harsher than before. The only thing that changes this dynamic is an internal shift, not in behavior, in need. Until you reach a place where you are genuinely okay without her, the testing will not stop. And every attempt to fix the relationship while remaining attached only accelerates the outcome you're trying to avoid. This is why attachment is dangerous, not because connection is bad, but because dependence is fatal to attraction. And until you understand that distinction, every relationship you enter will eventually arrive at the same crossroads. Different woman, different, same test, same result. When her subconscious senses weakness, it doesn't confront it directly. It switches modes. I call it check mode. This is not a thought she has. It's not a plan. She doesn't sit alone and decide to provoke you. The shift happens beneath awareness, the same way your body pulls its hand away from fire before your mind labels the sensation as pain. Something feels off, and that feeling demands verification. From this point forward, Her behavior changes in ways that seem irrational if you don't understand the mechanism behind them. She starts creating tension where none is necessary. She questions things she once accepted without comment. She becomes emotionally unpredictable. Warm one moment, distant the next. This is not chaos. It is pressure. Pressure designed to reveal what kind of man you are when comfort is removed. The tests start small. She challenges a decision you made, not aggressively, casually, almost playfully. You explain yourself. Explain? You think clarity is the solution. You don't notice that the explanation itself is the data point. She creates drama over something trivial, a tone, a look, a delay. You try to resolve it logically. You believe the issue is the issue. You don't see that the issue is irrelevant. What matters is how quickly you enter her emotional frame. Then she withdraws. Affection decreases, communication slows. She becomes less available. She doesn't tell you why. She wants to see what happens inside you when her presence is reduced. Do you stay steady, or do you chase? Most men chase. Not immediately. At first, it's subtle, extra texts, a softer voice, a desire to reassure. When that doesn't work, the pursuit escalates. Apologies for things they didn't do. Promises to improve without knowing what needs improvement. And her subconscious takes note. The tests intensify. She pushes boundaries she never pushed before. She flirts with independence, stays out later, becomes vague about her plans. Not because she wants to betray you, but because she wants to see if you can tolerate uncertainty without collapsing. This is where the cycle begins. She provokes. You give in to restore peace. She loses more respect. She pulls away further. You panic and chase harder. From the outside, it looks like dysfunction. From the inside, it's a feedback loop. I watched this cycle destroy a man I once respected deeply. He was a successful businessman, confident, decisive, respected in every room he entered, except one. At home, he was a different person. His wife would start fights over nothing. A comment he made, a plan he didn't run by her. She would threaten to leave, pack a bag, say she was done. Every time he panicked, flowers, jewelry, apologies, promises to change. He begged, he negotiated. He told her how much he loved her, how lost he would be without her. She came back. Not because the issue was resolved, because the test wasn't finished. She needed to see how much control she had. For a few weeks, things would be calm, almost loving. Then the pressure would return, stronger, more aggressive. Each cycle stripped him of a little more confidence. After 3 years, the man was unrecognizable. He couldn't make decisions without checking with her first. He walked on eggshells. He second-guessed everything. The same man who used to run board meetings now hesitated over what to watch on television. His anxiety was constant. And then it happened. She left him anyway. Not after a big fight, not after a dramatic betrayal. She simply told him she was done, that she had met someone else. A personal trainer from her gym. The man made 1/3 of what my friend made. Had none of his status, none of his resources. But he had something my friend had lost completely. Frame. The trainer didn't chase. He didn't beg. He didn't rearrange his life for her. He wasn't afraid of her moods. He wasn't impressed by her approval. He had his own structure, his own boundaries, his own center. Her conscious mind knew my friend was the better choice on paper. Her subconscious didn't care. It recognized strength and responded accordingly. This is what most men refuse to accept. Once the cycle begins, effort accelerates failure. Every time you give in to keep the peace, you confirm weakness. Every time you chase after she pulls away, you reinforce her power. Every time you beg for reassurance, you tell her you cannot regulate yourself without her. The cycle feeds on fear, and fear is intoxicating to the subconscious system running these tests, not in a pleasurable way, in a clarifying way. The more fear you display, the clearer the conclusion becomes. Men often believe that if they just hold on long enough, she will see how committed they are. That endurance will be rewarded. That patience will restore balance. It won't, because the test is not about endurance. It's about self-possession. A man who endures disrespect to avoid loss is not strong. He is tolerating what he should walk away from. And tolerance without boundaries is submission. This is why the cycle is so destructive. It doesn't just damage the relationship. It reshapes the man inside it. Each round erodes his sense of agency. His confidence becomes conditional. His identity becomes reactive. And once that happens, even if she stays, the relationship is dead. She may remain physically present, but emotionally she is already gone. The tragedy is that most men don't realize they are in a cycle. They believe each incident is isolated, each fight unique, each reconciliation progress. They don't see the pattern forming beneath the surface. Provoke, submit, withdraw, chase over and over, until there is nothing left to take. And when there is nothing left, she leaves. Not because she wanted to destroy him, because the test had reached its conclusion. Most men fail these tests in predictable ways, not because they are stupid, not because they are weak by nature, but because they respond from conditioning instead of awareness. They use tools that feel reasonable on the surface and catastrophic underneath. The first mistake is logic. When she creates drama, he tries to solve it. He explains, he clarifies. He breaks the situation down piece by piece, believing that if she understands his reasoning, the tension will dissolve. He assumes the conflict exists at the level of facts. It doesn't. Logic is irrelevant to a test that is emotional and subconscious. Every explanation is not clarity. It is submission. It signals that her emotional reaction has authority over his decisions, that he needs her to agree in order to stand where he stands. She doesn't hear the explanation. Her subconscious hears insecurity. The second mistake is fear. Fear of conflict, fear of anger, fear of silence, fear of loss. So he apologizes quickly, sometimes for things he didn't do, sometimes just to stop the discomfort. He compromises immediately, changes his position, softens his boundaries before they are even challenged. He tells himself he's being mature. What he's actually doing is teaching her that pressure works. Every time he gives in to avoid discomfort, he reinforces the same lesson. Push him, and he folds. Upset him, and he surrenders ground. Create emotional volatility, and he will abandon himself to restore calm. Her subconscious records this flawlessly. Weak. The third mistake is overcaring. This is where men believe love can overpower attraction. They respond to distance by giving more. More attention, more affection, more gifts, more reassurance. They become performers hoping effort will buy security. Look how much I care. Look how devoted I am. Please feel safe. But care given from need does not feel loving. It feels heavy. The more he tries to prove his value, the less value he communicates. He becomes a man auditioning for approval instead of one who expects respect as a baseline. Her subconscious interprets his increased effort as desperation. Desperation repels. Then there is therapy. Men believe therapy will fix what they cannot. That communication will resolve tension. That vulnerability will restore closeness. They sit in offices and are told to open up. to share fears, to express insecurity, to be more emotionally available. So they do. They cry. They confess doubt. They reveal weakness, believing honesty will create intimacy. The therapist nods. The wife says she appreciates the openness. For a moment, it feels like progress. It isn't. Because vulnerability without strength is exposure, not connection. Her subconscious does not reward emotional collapse. It recoils from it. The image of the man as stable, grounded, capable erodes further. She may intellectually support the process, but her attraction deteriorates silently. 3 months later, she's emotionally gone. Sometimes physically gone too. Another mistake is bringing in outside pressure. Family, friends, social consequences. Men believe that if there is accountability, she will behave differently. They think if others see what's happening, it will stabilize the relationship. What it actually does is confirm that he cannot handle his own life. He needs backup. Her subconscious sees this as further evidence of weakness. A man who cannot manage his relationship without intervention is not a leader. He is overwhelmed. I once worked with a man who tried every approach: logic, empathy, therapy, family intervention. His wife created massive fights over nothing: the dishwasher, his breathing, the way he sat on the couch. Each conflict escalated into emotional chaos. He read books, took notes, implemented communication strategies, went to individual therapy to work on himself. The tests got worse. She stayed out late, stopped answering calls, flirted with other men in front of him. Each behavior was a provocation, a probe. He was breaking. Anxiety attacks, sleepless nights, suicidal thoughts. Then something changed. Not in her, in him. He didn't have a breakthrough conversation. He didn't discover a new technique. He didn't set ultimatums. He didn't threaten. He stopped needing her approval. Not in anger, not in bitterness, not as a tactic. He genuinely stopped. He returned to the gym, reconnected with friends, rebuilt his routines. When she created drama, he didn't engage. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. "I'm going for a walk," he said calmly. "We can talk when you're calm." And he meant it. When she threatened to leave, he didn't plead. He didn't panic. "I'll help you pack." Not as a challenge, not as manipulation, as a fact. Something remarkable happened. The test stopped. Not immediately, but quickly. She softened, became affectionate again, engaged without tension. The woman he remembered returned. Not because he changed her, because he changed his inner position. This is where most men misunderstand the solution. They think it means becoming cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. They mistake indifference for strength. They shut down, build walls, withhold affection to regain control. That isn't strength, that is fear wearing armor. True strength is not emotional absence. It is emotional sovereignty. You still engage, you still care, you still love. But from a place where your stability is not at risk. Your affection is a choice, not a currency. Your presence is a gift, not a plea. A needy man gives affection to get something back. Validation, security, approval. A whole man gives affection because he wants to. No expectation, no dependency. A needy man avoids conflict because he fears loss. A whole man addresses issues calmly because outcomes do not define him. This emotional disengagement is not about not caring. It's about not being controlled by caring. You can love deeply without clinging desperately. You can want her without needing her. You can be present without disappearing into her emotional gravity. This distinction is where most men fail. They think strength means suppression, silence, stoicism without depth. They become rigid, unavailable, performative. They hide emotion to appear unbothered. But her subconscious knows the difference. Fake indifference smells like insecurity. Real strength is relaxed, open, unforced. It allows emotion to exist without obeying it. When you reach that place, something shifts. Not because she decides to stop testing, because her subconscious receives consistent data that testing is unnecessary. Every interaction reinforces the same signal. He is solid. And when that signal is clear, pressure fades. Not because she becomes nicer, because the question has been answered. The transformation most men seek cannot be performed. This is where many fail again. They hear everything I have just described and attempt to imitate the behavior without changing the internal state. They say the right words. They withdraw at the right moments. They set boundaries on the surface. But underneath, nothing has shifted. They are still afraid. Her subconscious knows immediately. You cannot pretend to be whole. You cannot act unbothered while secretly waiting for validation. You cannot posture strength while negotiating with fear inside yourself. The detection system is too precise, too old, too well trained. This is why dominance is not behavioral. It is existential. It comes from a man who has reached a place where his sense of self is not dependent on being chosen, where his happiness does not hinge on her presence, where his worth is not up for debate. Until that switch flips, nothing changes. This inner shift is not easy. It is not quick, and it cannot be faked. It requires a man to confront the part of himself that is starving, the part that looks to a woman to complete him, to regulate him, to validate his existence. That hunger is what drives all the failing behaviors. The explaining, the chasing, the appeasing, the overgiving. As long as you are emotionally starving, you will accept any condition to be fed. Think about it in concrete terms. Imagine you haven't eaten in days. Someone offers you food, but only if you agree to humiliating conditions. You accept. You don't argue. You don't negotiate. Hunger removes leverage. Now imagine you've just finished a full meal. The same offer is made. You can take it or leave it. The conditions don't move you. Your internal state has changed. The food is the same. Your relationship to it is not. This is the difference between neediness and wholeness. Most men are starving without knowing it. They confuse hunger for love. They believe attachment is intimacy. They think anxiety is passion. They mistake relief for connection. Until that hunger is addressed, every relationship becomes a transaction. Every interaction carries stakes that shouldn't exist. Every test feels threatening because it is. Wholeness removes those stakes. When you are complete, her approval becomes optional. Her presence becomes a choice. Her departure becomes survivable. That doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you grounded. And grounded men do not trigger check mode. They don't because there is nothing to verify. Every interaction sends the same message. Calm, centered, unmoved, engaged without dependence, interested without urgency. The tests decrease, not because she consciously decides to stop testing, because her subconscious stops receiving conflicting data. But here is the harsh reality most men don't want to hear. If you have been failing these tests for years, if her subconscious has firmly categorized you as weak, it may be too late for your current relationship. This is not pessimism. It is observation. Once a woman has seen you beg, plead collapse, and abandon your integrity for her approval, that image does not fade easily. You cannot unsee weakness once it has been fully revealed. No matter how much you change, her subconscious may never fully trust the transformation. You can grow. You can become strong. You can set real boundaries. You can become genuinely whole. And she may still look at you through the lens of who you were. I have seen men transform completely, build themselves from the ground up, achieve emotional sovereignty, maintain firm boundaries with calm authority, and their wives still treat them with contempt. Not because the men failed again, because the damage was already done. Her subconscious had recorded too much evidence. The classification was locked. This is the part no one likes to talk about. There is no guaranteed redemption arc. Sometimes the lesson arrives too late for the relationship it was meant to save. That does not mean the work is wasted. It means it will matter for the next one. This is why understanding these dynamics early is crucial. Not after years of erosion, not after your identity has been negotiated away, but from the beginning. Never allow yourself to become so attached that you disappear. Never make your boundaries conditional. Never outsource your sense of self to someone else's emotions. Because once you are categorized as weak, the relationship is effectively over. It may continue in form, in habit, in shared logistics, but the core is gone. The testing never fully stops, by the way. Even the strongest men are tested occasionally. The difference is scale. For a strong man, a test is a moment, a blip, something he passes without noticing because his frame is stable. For a weak man, every test is a crisis. Every moment threatens the relationship. Every disagreement feels existential. The strong man doesn't fear tests. He barely registers them. This brings us to a critical distinction. When I talk about boundaries, about being willing to walk away, about showing teeth, I am not talking about threats or ultimatums. Those come from fear, from trying to control through intimidation. Real boundaries are not announced, they are lived. A weak man says, "If you do that again, I'm leaving," and hopes it scares her into compliance. A strong man doesn't say anything. He simply does not accept what violates his standards. He removes himself without drama, without anger, without explanation. One is manipulation, the other is self-respect. Threats reveal need. Consequences reveal autonomy. And autonomy is what her subconscious responds to. Remember this above all else. This is not personal. Every woman does this. Not because of cruelty, but because of programming that predates modern morality by thousands of years. The system is not interested in fairness. It is interested in survival. You will be tested. The only question is whether you recognize the test for what it is and respond from strength, or whether you fail it by trying to negotiate your way out of discomfort. The choice is yours. And once you see this pattern clearly, you can never unsee it. What this story really teaches has very little to do with relationships. It's about where you place your center. Most men spend their lives slowly handing that center away. First to a partner, then to approval, then to comfort. They don't notice it happening because it feels like love, responsibility, maturity. But one day they wake up and realize they no longer know who they are without someone else's reaction guiding them. That loss doesn't just damage attraction, it damages the man himself. The deepest lesson here is this: you cannot build a stable life on anything that can leave you. Not a woman, not a job, not validation, not being needed. When your sense of worth depends on something external, fear becomes your default state. And fear quietly controls every decision you make. Strength is not about dominance. It's about wholeness. A whole man can love deeply without disappearing. He can commit without surrendering himself. He can care without begging. He can lose without collapsing. That inner stability doesn't make life colder, it makes it honest, clean, grounded. And when you live from that place, everything changes. Not because you manipulate outcomes, but because you no longer need them to feel complete. If this message resonated with you, I'd like to hear from you. Share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. More importantly, tell me what part of this hit closest to home. And if you want more conversations like this, calm, direct, and grounded in reality, consider subscribing to the channel. Not out of pressure, just if it feels aligned.